I am live. I'm reading out of Eyes of Horus. It is a far memory book by Joan Marshall Grants. It plays in Egypt 3,500 years BC. And I am here in the fourth part of this book. And the fourth part, the chapter I am now reading is the last chapter in the part 4, which is chapter 8, and it is entitled Royal Embalmer. It will be rough, I just know. Helioclios is dead. And we are now here at this chapter, Royal Embalmer. Dacleon told me that in the royal gnomes there were 2 degrees of embalming. The more usual one took 4 days, but the second degree, performed only on members of the royal family, high priests and a few important officials who had been granted this special favour, continued for 40 days. During this period, traditional mourning would continue in all households belonging to the dead man, and his property would not pass to their heir until the tomb was sealed. Tradition decreed that only those whose work it is to attend the dead shall touch the corpse. So the embalmer servants prepared Helioclios for his last journey to the royal city. The litter they had brought for him was shaped like a sarcophagus. Nut with outstretched arms guarded each corner, her head resting among the stars which covered the lid. The litter in which I travelled was closely curtained in white to signify mourning, for which I was glad, as it gave me a chance to sleep. I woke just after we entered the west gate and looked out through a chink in the curtains, recognized one of the narrow streets which led out of the foreign market. The bearer stopped at a door in a high, unpainted wall, and I heard bolts being drawn before the door swung open. Clipped acacia trees lined the path to a white house, which was similar to those occupied by court officials. Beyond it I saw several outbuildings. They were sunk in the ground, and at first I took them to be wine stores. Then I realized they served a very different purpose, for it was to one of them that Helioclios was taken. My litter was set down at the entrance to the main house, and there I was greeted by a venerable old man who told me he was Jan, the royal embalmer. I had expected him to be a furtive, wizened creature, a kind of sorcerer, but he was wholesome as a bowl of sweet butter. He wore a robe of dark blue linen, and though the slant of his eyebrows and something about the moulding of his cheekbones led me to think he was not of the pure blood, he spoke without a foreign intonation. He invited me into his house and gave me wine, which he said had come from Pharaoh's vineyard. It was heavy in texture and very sweet. As I drank it, I felt a lifting of the weariness which had come from many hours of insufficient sleep. I wondered if he thought I had come either to spy on him or to make sure that his work was faithfully carried out. So I explained I was a stranger to the city, that in my men did not prepare so carefully for the tomb. He smiled, the smile of a contented man who is never disturbed by fears or regrets. Neither do I belong to this city, though I have been here for many years. Pharaoh and the members of his court are preoccupied with how their flesh may best endure when they no longer inhabit it. That is why I came here after I had added to the skill taught to me by my father, who was also an embalmer. He learned his trade from a kinsman of my grandmother, who was not an Egyptian. Now I am no longer poor, but to cheat corruption has become my craft, and I am too jealous of perfection to abandon it, while there is still much to be discovered. In the old days I might have become a priest, but the temples of this time make no claim on my loyalties. He stood up, still smiling, and went on. The body will be ready for me by now. As he is your kinsman, you may accompany me if you wish, and I will not keep any of my secrets until you are gone. I realized he was doing me a great courtesy, so I accepted his offer, hoping he did not recognize that I found the prospect disquieting. The living must purify themselves before they attend the dead. Come with me and I will show you what you must do to make ready. I was surprised to find that I had already felt friendship towards this curious man. There was neither deference nor patronage in his manner. He took it for granted that I recognized him for a master craftsman, and he was blinded neither by modesty nor conceit. His house was furnished with extreme simplicity, though the frescoes in the hall I had seldom seen equalled. Though there was little other decoration, I realized he must be rich, to be able so to content his taste, for the floors were of rare stone, white veined with purple or green, and the doors were of cedar wood, highly polished. I was shown into a small room where a servant waited to minister to me. Following his instructions, I first washed all over with water in which must have been the juice of many citrus fruits. It was sour to taste and stung like fire when it touched a little cut on my forearm, and then he rubbed me lightly with oil that had a pungent but not unpleasant smell. When he had finished, he gave me a robe such as his master had worn, which had long sleeves and covered me from neck to feet. Even my sandals were replaced by others that had wooden soles and thongs of plaited straw. Then the servant led me back to the room where I had drunk wine with Jan, and I found him waiting for me. He was dressed as I was, but the sleeves of his robes left the forearms bare, and his head was covered with a folded headcloth of white linen. I saw he had refilled the wine cups, and, obeying a sudden impulse, I held mine up to the east. Without hesitation he completed the watcher's toast. Look to the dawn and see how Ra returns to those who watch for him. Then you are one of us, I exclaimed. The oryx has already honored my house, for twice Hanuk, son of Royden, has found it convenient to wear the insignia of a servant of the royal embalmer, and more than twice men have left their homes in my litter of the dead, only to find their health restored when they entered my door. Whereafter my house became the first stage of their journey to HORUS-A. It may well be that in the time of the horizon, many men who live for Egypt need first to pretend to die, just as some may die because they lived against her. None will challenge the servants of the royal embalmer, for they believe I hold the secrets of their enjoyment of the hereafter, and it is known that my skill is not for purchase by those who have offended against me. I regret that if you would see me at work, there is no time for you first to refresh yourself by sleep, for, especially in the hot weather, the dead will not wait on the patience of the living. I followed him across the formal garden. He was so gracious a host that it was difficult to realize I was not to watch him throw millet to the fish in this lotus pool, but instead would see him opposite the law of dissolution. The flight of steps leading down into the ground was longer than I had expected, and at the foot of it we came to a shaft which continued to slope down and led to a narrow room cut in the solid rock. It was lit by 4 lamps set on ledges in the walls, and the air was cool as a deep well. The naked body of Heliokios was lying on a stone table in the middle of the floor, and beyond it I saw a dark opening leading to a further room. The flesh had begun to discolour, and when he saw the extent of the livid patches, Jan gave an exclamation of annoyance. Several knives and curiously sharp instruments were laid out on a stool by the body, and beside this were 4 canopic jars. Jan picked up one of the objects from the stool. It had a handle the length of his palm, and at one end were 2 metal hooks curved, like a leopard's claw. In the other hand he took a narrow strip of flexible metal, bent it until it could be inserted into the right nostril of the corpse, and then released it so that it held the nostril wide open. I think I will finish this another time. This is the first part of chapter 8, the embalmer.